Imagine a sudden, really intense heat. So intense it feels like actual fire, and maybe a throbbing pain that just shakes you. It's quite a dramatic feeling. Today, we're diving into a substance known for exactly those kinds of effects. Welcome to the deep dive.
Glad to be here. We're focusing on belladonna today. You probably know it from its striking purple flowers. But in homeopathy, especially through the lens of James Tyler Kent's lectures, it's seen quite differently, as a remedy of, well, incredible violence and suddenness.
Right, Kent's Materia Medica, a foundational text.
Absolutely. It gives us a really specific look at how its properties are understood and applied.
So our mission today is to get into those precise details, the characteristics, the sensitivities, the unique patterns that define belladonna in homeopathy. You'll get a sense not just of what symptoms it might address, but the specific way they show up. It's a unique look at these rapid, intense reactions.
Yeah, let's unpack it.
Okay, so Kent kicks things off by describing its action as, what, violent?
That's the word he uses. He says it takes hold of the system with great violence, and he notes it's particularly suited for plethoric, vigorous, and intellectual people.
Plethoric. Okay, what does that really mean in this context? Is it just like healthy people?
Sort of.
Yeah.
It suggests someone who's generally robust, maybe a bit full-blooded, energetic, intense even.
Right.
And when these kinds of people get sick, it seems to hit them really hard and really fast. It's not a slow decline.
Right, not a slow burn, more like an explosion. And you mentioned violence, but also suddenness. Kent really emphasizes that, doesn't he? The sudden start and sudden stop.
Absolutely critical. He repeats it often. Complaints, pain, sufferings come on suddenly and with great violence and subside suddenly. It's not gradual. It's like a flash flood,
Yeah.
Appears fast, disappears fast.
Okay, and this ties into the heat.
Directly. An intense, unusual heat with any inflammation. Kent's description is so vivid, he says, when you put your hand upon a belladonna subject, you will suddenly withdraw it. The heat is so intense.
No.
Yeah, and he adds, the memory of the heat is carried in the hand and fingers for some time.
That's memorable. Is that heat unique to belladonna, or do other remedies have that kind of palpable heat?
Well, other remedies definitely involve heat, sure. But the intensity described here, that sort of shocking heat that leaves an impression, that's pretty characteristic of belladonna.
Okay, and Kent warns about confusing this with continued fevers, like typhoid.
He does. Because belladonna fever is typically remittent. It comes and goes, maybe fluctuates wildly, but it doesn't have that steady, gradual rise and fall you see in something like typhoid.
Why is that distinction so important? What happens if you do give belladonna for, say, typhoid delirium?
Well, it's about matching the remedy's energy to the disease's energy, really. Belladonna's action is sharp, intense, but maybe more superficial compared to the deep, prolonged state of typhoid. Kent suggests that giving belladonna in typhoid might quiet the delirium for a bit, but it could actually leave the patient weaker, more prostrate.
Because it's not hitting the root cause.
Exactly. It's not addressing that deeper, ongoing process.
Yeah.
He suggests something like stramonium might be a better fit for that kind of continuous deep-seated delirium.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. Matching the signature. So back to that core intensity. You mentioned a trio: heat, redness, and burning. Can you flesh that out a bit more?
Sure. The redness is often bright, shiny. Kent even says red as scarlet. You see it in inflamed throats or maybe red patches over inflamed glands.
Right. Okay.
Though he does note it can become dusky or mottled later, maybe moving towards what he calls a zymotic state.
Zymotic, like fermentation.
Kind of, yeah. Think of it as describing a really severe, maybe infectious condition where the body seems overwhelmed by a toxic process, like in severe scarlet fever.
Got it. And the burning, you said it was like a coal of fire?
Exactly. Intense burning, maybe in the throat or on the skin. Now, the patient might actually say, "It burns so, doctor. It burns so."
Yeah.
It's not just warmth. It's a painful burning sensation.
Like touching a hot stove, but from the inside.
That's a good way to put it. And along with these three, the inflamed parts swell up rapidly. They get really sensitive to touch.
Right.
And there's this feeling like they might burst. And then there's the throbbing. Kent describes it vividly. A turmoil is going on. An earthquake is taking place.
An earthquake.
Yeah, with violently pulsating arteries like in the temples or the neck.
Uh-huh.
The whole system just feels like it's throbbing with this intense, sudden congestion.
It's a really powerful picture. Intense is definitely the word. And this intensity, it seems like it leads to an overall sensitivity, right?
Mm-hmm.
The hyper-responsiveness.
That's a huge part of it. Kent actually says it is one of the most painful of remedies. Patients seem to suffer more than you might expect. And again, the pains come suddenly, remain longer or shorter, and they go suddenly. Doesn't matter if it's nerve pain or inflammation.
And the quality of the pain.
It can be anything, really. Tearing, shooting, burning, stinging, pressing, smarting. Often exaggerated, intense versions of those pains.
And the sensitivity isn't just to internal pain, right? It's to external things, too.
Absolutely. The patient is typically worse from motion, light, any kind of jar, and cold or drafts. They usually want to be wrapped up warmly, kept still and quiet.
Okay, now Kent highlights one symptom that sounds almost minor, but you said it's key. The jar of the bed. Why is that such a big deal for Belladonna?
It's a classic indicator of their extreme hyperesthesia, that heightened nervous sensitivity. Kent really emphasizes it. Even the slightest vibration from someone touching the bed can aggravate all their complaints.
Wow.
He gives examples, like someone with an inflamed liver or gallstone colic just shouting, "Don't touch the bed, doctor," because even that tiny movement makes the pain unbearable.
So it's not just about the inflamed part being sore, it's the whole nervous system reacting to the vibration.
Exactly. It can even show up without obvious inflammation, like in nervous states after childbirth, where just a little jar causes distress. It really underscores how sensitive they are.
And this hypersensitivity also connects to spasms and convulsions.
It does. Belladonna covers both general convulsions and localized spasms, especially in tubular organs like the bile ducts or the ureters. Kent talks about a clutching sensation.
Clutching?
Yeah, like in gallstone colic, where the duct spasms shut. Belladonna can sometimes relieve that spasm very quickly.
And for convulsions in children?
He notes they're often violent, linked to brain congestion, and can be triggered by things like bright light, cold air, or just being uncovered. He often associates it with nervous, brainy children, especially boys with large heads.
So these individuals are just amplified? Everything's turned up too high?
Pretty much. Kent uses phrases like extreme irritability of the tissues and increased irritability of the nerve centers. It leads to a heightened sense of everything: taste, smell, touch, and excitability of the sensorium, he calls it.
The sensorium. So basically where all the senses meet.
Right, making them acutely sensitive to light, noise, touch, and especially that jarring motion.
How does this compare to other remedies? You mentioned opium.
Yeah, it's an interesting contrast. With opium, you might see more congestion, but actually less excitability, sometimes even stupor. It really shows how homeopathy looks at the individual reaction, the symptoms, not just the underlying condition or pathology. How is this person experiencing their illness? That's the key.
That's a crucial point. It's about the unique experience. And this sensitivity pops up in unexpected places, like the scalp. He mentions not being able to brush hair.
Right. The scalp can be so sensitive that the patient cannot have the hair bound up or even combed. It feels as if pulled.
Why highlight that specifically?
Well, it's another concrete example of that deep nervous system irritability. It's not just a vague feeling. It manifests in very specific, sometimes peculiar ways. It paints a picture of just how uncomfortable they are.
And Kent compares belladonna's sensitivity to others like hepar, nitric acid, coffea, nux vomica. Is he saying belladonna has all those sensitivities?
Not necessarily all at once in every patient, but he's showing the breadth of sensitivity that belladonna can cover. It helps differentiate. While hepar might faint from pain or nitric acid is bothered by noise, belladonna often presents a wider, more intense cluster of these sensitivities affecting the whole person. It helps you find the remedy that best fits the total picture.
Okay. And another interesting point he makes is the rapid reaction to the remedy itself.
Yes. The patient might feel relief almost instantly after a dose. They might say, "That medicine helped me surprisingly quickly."
Why is that important to note?
It reflects that same high reactivity, that excitability of their system. It's responding to the stimulus, the remedy, very fast. You see that quick reaction sometimes with nux vomica or zincum too. It tells the prescriber, okay, this remedy is likely hitting the mark for this acute, intense state. It's different from, say, cuprum, where there's also sensitivity, but it might be more chronic, leading to overreactions that are less sudden.
Got it. So we have this picture. Sudden, intense, sensitive. Let's walk through the body now. How does this show up, say, in the head? What are belladonna headaches like?
Oh, they're classic belladonna. Stabbing, throbbing, shooting pains, usually worse from motion, jar, light, even winking, and definitely drafts.
Sounds awful.
Kent describes sensations like the brain going up and down, tearing and burning, or feeling as if the head would burst. Real hammering pains. Patients might roll their head from the sheer intensity, but paradoxically, that movement actually makes the pain worse.
But pressure helps, like a tight bandage.
Often, yes. Steady pressure can ameliorate, but a sudden touch would aggravate. And triggers can be simple things like exposure to cold air, or even, as you mentioned, merely having the haircut.
Okay, now here's something you said was really crucial, the direction of the complaints. Belladonna often goes from the head downwards.
Yes, this is a fascinating observation from Kent. He notes that complaints often come through the head and go downwards.
What does that mean practically? How does that help?
Well, it means if a belladonna type gets, say, rheumatism in their legs, the trigger might have been getting their head cold or wet or uncovering their head. The problem starts high and moves down.
Ah, I see. And that's different from other remedies.
Very different. Think of aconite or pulsatilla, where complaints often arise after getting the feet wet and tend to move upwards, or roost tox, where it might stay localized to the part that got wet. This downward directionality in belladonna reveals a kind of constitutional flow, a pattern that really helps distinguish it. It's key for individualization.
That's a really neat distinction, but then Kent mentions an exception, a freak symptom, he calls it, a restlessness in the legs that's better for motion.
Right. It seems like a contradiction, doesn't it? He describes a kind of restlessness with tearing pain from the hips down that actually feels better when moving and worse when resting.
How does that fit with the general rule of being worse for motion?
This is where we distinguish between generals and particulars. The general state of the belladonna patient is aggravation from motion. That applies to the whole person. But this specific leg pain is a particular symptom. It's localized. So even though the patient overall feels worse moving, this specific pain feels better. It's a freak because it deviates from the general rule, but it can still be belladonna if all the other general symptoms they use, the heat, the redness, the suddenness, the overall sensitivity, match strongly.
So don't throw the remedy out just because one small detail doesn't fit the main pattern, as long as the overall picture aligns. Makes sense. Okay, moving down the eyes.
Typically inflamed, glistening, pupils often dilated, face flushed, intense redness, burning pain. Again, worse from motion and light. Extreme photophobia, sensitivity to light, and maybe seeing flashes of light. Kent also describes this look in infants with brain congestion, half-opened, protruding, staring eyes. And he mentions spasmodic strabismus, sudden cross-eyedness linked to brain issues, which he felt remedies should cure, not surgery.
And mucous membranes. You mentioned dryness.
Yes, great dryness is a key feature. Nose, mouth, throat, larynx, chest, all can feel very dry. This leads to things like a dry, hacking, spasmodic cough. And sometimes this very dryness can cause pain because the normal secretions are checked, leading to pressure and inflammation, like a maddening headache with suppressed catarrh.
So the lack of normal mucus flow backs things up, causing pain.
Exactly. It's different from an old established cold with lots of thick mucus. This is acute dryness causing trouble.
And the throat itself, besides being dry.
Often significant swelling, great tumefaction, extremely sensitive, swollen, difficulty swallowing, especially liquids, and that clutching sensation can be felt right in the throat.
Clutching again, like a spasm.
Precisely. It can be so intense that food or drink gets forced back up, maybe into the nose. And remember, that clutching can happen elsewhere too, uterus, liver.
You also mentioned belladonna is a hemorrhagic remedy, easy bleeding.
Yes, given the intensity and congestion. Bleeding isn't surprising. Often bright red blood may be clotted from various places, eyes, nose, throat, uterus, even ulcers. It fits that picture of acute vascular disturbance.
Okay. Any specific cravings?
Kent highlights an unconquerable craving for lemons and lemon juice, sometimes lemonade. Also often very thirsty for cold water, maybe wanting it little and often, which is similar to arsenicum.
And stomach and bowels. More inflammation.
Pretty much. Inflammatory conditions, pain, burning, bloating, and that extreme sensitivity to jar, motion, and pressure. Kids might get violent colic, often feeling better bending forward. Kent even mentions its potential use in appendicitis if the symptom picture matches closely.
The bladder, too.
Intense irritation there as well. Constant urge to urinate, burning urine, and spasms, again, spasmodic retention where they can't go, or involuntary dribbling, maybe during sleep or with a shock. That clutching at the neck of the bladder.
It seems like spasms and sensitivity are everywhere with belladonna. What about female reproductive organs?
Lots of potential symptoms there. Uterus and ovaries can be congested, very sore, sensitive to touch, and that jar. Violent uterine hemorrhage is key bright red, clotted blood that the patient might say feels hot.
Feels hot, like the blood itself.
Yes, that's a specific sensation noted, similar to the remedy Sabina. Belladonna is often considered for checking hemorrhage after miscarriage or childbirth if the symptoms fit.
Any other specific uterine issues?
Kent mentions hourglass contraction, a specific type of spasm during labor or after, and violent menstrual pain, dysmenorrhea, again with those clutching pains.
And you mentioned a right-sided preference earlier.
Often, yes. Belladonna symptoms frequently seem to affect the right ovary or the right side of the throat or just the right side of the body more generally. Not always, but it's a common pattern.
And that bearing down sensation.
Oh yes, profound. A feeling of prolapsus, as if the whole inner parts were coming out, made worse by jarring. Women might need to sit with legs apart or find they must sit up because lying down stretches the abdominal muscles uncomfortably. It speaks to that intense internal pressure and sensitivity.
Breasts, too.
Could be affected during lactation, yes.
Yeah.
Mastitis, perhaps. Becoming red, incredibly sensitive to touch, feeling hard as a stone. Belladonna can bring rapid relief to that pain and congestion.
Okay, larynx and chest. Cough.
Again, that clutching and choking feeling in the larynx leads to a dry, spasmodic, almost barking cough, often worse at night. It's considered for whooping cough, where the child might dread the cough coming on and scream because it hurts their chest so much.
Pneumonia.
Pleurisy.
Yes, it can fit the picture for both. For pleurisy, Kent notes it often favors the right side. The patient cannot lie on the inflamed side, and they're very aggravated by the jar of the bed.
How does that compare to, say, bryonia? Isn't that also right-sided? Good point. Bryonia also often prefers the right side in pleurisy, but crucially, the bryonia patient feels better lying on the painful side as it immobilizes it. And bryonia usually has less of the intense heat and throbbing compared to belladonna. Those little details are everything.
Individualization again. And finally, joints. Rheumatism.
Inflammatory rheumatism fits the belladonna picture too. Swollen joints, hot, red, burning. Very sensitive to motion and jar. And these patients are typically very sensitive to cold, can't bear the least uncovering, and often feel better from warmth applied to the joint.
Wow. So that intense, sudden, sensitive picture really permeates the whole system.
It absolutely does.
Okay, so if we pull back to the bigger picture of using this remedy, Kent stresses causes like sudden exposure to cold in plethoric individuals.
That's a common trigger, he notes. But here's a really important point about application. Belladonna is generally not the remedy for repeated, recurrent complaints.
Wait, why not? If it works so well for the first attack.
Because, as Kent puts it, it lacks periodicity and continuance of complaints. Belladonna is for the acute crisis, the sudden violent episode that resolves one way or another, ends in death or recovery, as he starkly puts it.
So it's a short-term fix.
It's a remedy for the acute state. It doesn't usually address the underlying chronic tendency that makes someone susceptible to those attacks repeatedly. It might mitigate periodical complaints, meaning lessen the severity of each attack, but it won't typically cure the underlying pattern that causes them to recur.
Okay, so it's like putting out the fire, but not fireproofing the house.
Exactly. That's a great analogy. For the chronic tendency, you'd likely need a different remedy, one that matches that deeper, ongoing pattern.
So if belladonna helps the acute phase, what might come next? Are there remedies that often follow belladonna well or antidote it?
Yes. Calcarea carbonic is frequently mentioned as a follow-up, especially for the chronic state in those big-headed, plump, plethoric, precocious children who get belladonna-like illnesses. Calcarea often addresses the underlying constitution. Belladonna can also sometimes act as an acute antidote to certain effects of lachesis, like a dry, tickling cough, and calcarea might follow lachesis chronically. And interestingly, belladonna can antidote ill effects from crude belladonna poisoning or overuse.
What about sleep? How does belladonna affect sleep?
The sleep is often disturbed, congestive, maybe a stupor rather than restful sleep, full of dreams, full of violence.
Nightmares.
Yes, waking suddenly in fright from horrible dreams, often with jerking or twitching. A characteristic is the head getting hot while the feet get cold during sleep. Sometimes they wake with a sudden shriek.
Intense, even in sleep. And finally, Kent connects belladonna strongly to scarlet fever.
Yes, particularly what he calls typical old-fashioned sydenham scarlet fever, the classic, really intense form.
Sydenham scarlet fever, that's the historical severe type.
Exactly. Belladonna mirrors that picture well. The bright red face, the glossy-looking skin, the intense heat, the burning.
How does knowing that help distinguish it, say, from apis, which is also used in conditions with rashes?
It's the quality of the symptoms. Belladonna's rash is typically smooth, shining, intensely red. The patient feels burning hot, but often wants to be covered and warm. Apis, on the other hand, might have a rougher rash, more like hives, with stinging pains. And crucially, the apis patient usually feels much better being cool, wanting covers off. These fine distinctions are key.
So wrapping this up, what's the big takeaway for someone listening? We've covered a lot of ground.
I think the takeaway is seeing how incredibly detailed homeopathic observation can be. We've journeyed through Belladonna via Kent, and you see these core features, the violent onset, the intense heat, redness, burning, that profound sensitivity to motion and jar. It paints a very, very specific picture.
Right. It's not just inflammation or fever. It's how that inflammation or fever manifests in that unique individual. Understanding these precise characteristics allows for a much deeper level of observation.
Exactly. It goes way beyond just naming a disease. It's about understanding the person's unique experience of being unwell.
This whole deep dive, it really reveals not just a remedy, but almost a philosophy of observation, doesn't it?
It really does, where every little nuance, how hot the skin feels, how sudden the pain is, whether they flinch when the bed moves, becomes a potentially vital clue.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it, about all the subtle stories our bodies are telling all the time, and maybe how much more keenly we could learn to listen.